Okay, good morning. Welcome back everyone to Jackal Nagar. We have up next a speaker who is going to be running us through inclusive storytelling with dynamic data. Larene Le Gassick is the head of technology at Intopia, a Microsoft MVP in accessibility, and a community manager of Tech Leading Ladies Australia. She specialises in building full-stack applications with accessibility and inclusion at front of mind. She's an international conference speaker and a guest university lecturer on digital accessibility and software architecture. She's one of the core members of the DataViz Ally group, formed in 2020, and her and other accessibility advocates and experts came together virtually to solve for a lack of resources and guidance for making data visualisation inclusive of people with various disabilities, with the goal of raising awareness and providing guidelines and solutions. Please welcome Larene to the stage today.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. Thank you, everyone, for coming. I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. Hi, yes, my name is Larene Le Gassick. It's so wonderful to be here in Perth. I usually live and work in Meanjin, or also known as Brisbane. And it is the home of the Turrbal and the Yagara peoples. And I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, as well as those of the Noongar peoples of Wajok or Perth, and to all the elders of communities of anyone travelling here or watching online today. My notes are not synced up to my slides, but thank you so much to all the amazing sponsors of EDD Perth, and as well as the organisers and the other speakers, and of course everyone coming along to hang out. It is a huge, huge pleasure to be here. Okay. So, a little bit about me. Oh, it is synced up. Sorry, I had a bit of a family emergency this morning, so I'm a bit scattered at the moment, so please forgive me if I seem a little bit unprepared. A little bit about me. I'm a software engineer and I work at a company called Intopia. As David mentioned, we are a digital accessibility consultancy. If you end up enjoying this talk and would like to talk about accessibility at work all day, please also consider checking out our Work With Us page. We are hiring. It is very scary, but we'd love to work with you. I think Julie's in the room as well. Hey, Julie. Please feel free to come chat to one of us if you are interested in hearing more about working in accessibility. My name is pronounced Larene. It's a tough one. My parents were not kind when they chose my name. I am not at all French, even though my name is fully French. I am half Chinese and half Australian. My pronouns are she and her, and my Twitter handle is LareneLG. And I already went through that bit, so and something related to the talk that I'm giving today is a lot of the content has come from an article that I've been writing for a non-for-profit company on DataViz that is coming out in December. I'm very excited to share it with you all. So a bit of the story behind this talk. So in the before times, February 2020, I did a talk at the Brisbane Data Science Meetup, one of my favourites. Hi, Enrique, if you're watching online. And I also gave a version of this talk with kind of a speed chart redesign that is on YouTube as well at a conference called Data Eng Bytes. You might have heard of it. Really, really cool conference, also non-for-profit and community run. And I admit, I did give a talk on inclusive presentations at Fenders on Wednesday. Those talks were not the most accessible talks, so I'm always learning along the way. I won't be covering a whole lot of very in-depth kind of accessibility data viz basics today. But if you want to kind of learn more and find out kind of the details, I've got a bunch of resources at the end that you can go and have a look at if this is interesting to you and helpful to you. So the talk that I did at the meetup in Brisbane was called Inclusive Storytelling with Data, and I only focused on static charts or images of charts. So didn't talk about the interaction at all. And I made a big promise that I would do a follow-up one about dynamic charts, and here I am, 2 years later. And so this is a bit of a reprise of that talk, and I'm very, very excited. I think I have internet, but the big kind of trigger for this topic and the big light bulb moment for me was reading a book called Storytelling with Data by Cole Nussbaumer-Knaflic. Amazing data viz expert who worked at Google and ended up her whole job being teaching people how to communicate better with data at Google. And I really recommend reading that book before anything else. Really awesome book on the kind of basics of design and data communication. And if you want to make accessible data visualizations, as that book will mention, you do need to learn a little bit about design. A well-designed data visualization is easy to interpret and understand, and good design takes into account the needs of users, and some of those users will have disabilities. And so accessible design is inclusive design, and inclusive design is the key to good design, where it considers not only disability, but language, culture, gender, age, and other forms of human difference. If you haven't heard of inclusive design before, there's a very popular diagram that I've got on the screen at the moment about inclusive design from Microsoft. You may have seen it before, or you may have known of it before. So it's a table with 3 columns and 4 rows, and the columns refer to examples of permanent, temporary, and situational disability. And the rows refer to senses such as human senses such as motor, vision, hearing, and speech. So an example in the diagram is a permanent motor disability is maybe an amputee with a missing arm, and while a temporary motor disability is having a broken arm, and a situational disability is perhaps a parent carrying a newborn. And you can come up with your own examples for the others. The goal of this graphic is to illustrate that if disability is viewed as a mismatch between a person, that disability can be viewed as a mismatch between a person and their environment. The environment is actually disabling the person. Designing for disability actually benefits everybody. So to design a chart accessibly will help your data viz be understood by more and more people. If you want to learn more about inclusive design, please do check out Microsoft's Inclusive Design Toolkit, and I believe they are also a sponsor of DDD Perth. So one thing I do want to note, and a common misconception if you are new to accessibility is not one size fits all. It's not trying to kind of craft everyone to go through the same UI flow. It is providing multiple pathways that not every user might kind of take. So an example is, brain freeze. So for the example of data visualizations, visual folks might prefer to look at a chart or a data visualization, and maybe people who prefer looking at the data and understanding the data would prefer to have a table presented to them instead, so that they can do their own analysis on the data. So that is an example of being flexible and providing multiple pathways for the same outcome. You want people to understand or to consume your data. And so one of the big problems is that and the reason for kind of kicking off this talk and this kind of meetup group in data visualization is there's not a whole lot of resources out there to, or there is now actually, to learn how to make the interactive dynamic data viz accessible. And what I mean by that is most data visualizations are able to be accessed using a mouse, and for sighted folks, but when it comes down to people who cannot use a mouse, they only use the keyboard maybe, or people who use screen readers, they are not able to look at the data at all. And so I have a video from a talk kind of on a 101 data visualization, just to show an example, and hopefully it plays, of what it is like for a screen reader user to access an inaccessible chart. So a lot of this blew up because when kind of COVID began, there was also the US election. And so there was an incredible amount of data visualization, and especially kind of the advancements in also data visualization libraries. Kind of anybody could kind of put together a really shiny looking data visualization or something that's super interactive and super cool, which they were. But unfortunately, they weren't the best experience for everyone. Come on, internet.
Something else that's more technical is making it work for a screen reader. Screen readers, such as, for example, VoiceOver for Mac, they will read what's displayed on the page. And unless you're using a data viz library that already puts a lot of focus in screen reader accessibility, you will have to do quite a bit of technical work there yourself. Let's take a look at an example. This is from Fox News. During the elections, they had a page that live updated as the electoral college votes came in. And the progress bar underneath would show how many votes from each state each of the candidates had gathered already and how close they were to getting the 270 that they needed to win. However, let's listen to what it's like for a screen reader.
Joe Biden image 306. Joe Biden. Kamala Harris. Donald Trump image 232. Donald Trump. Mike Pence. 1 votes. 1 votes. 20 votes. 4 votes. 2 votes. 11 votes. 10 votes. 10 votes. 16 votes. 6 votes. 14 votes. 4 votes. 5 votes. 29 votes. 4 votes. 7 votes. 20 votes. 3 votes. 13 votes. 12 votes. 10 votes. 11 votes. 9 votes. 55 votes. 7 votes. 3 votes.
I think you get the idea. That goes on for another 5 minutes, so I'm not going to keep that one playing. Oops. Oh, apologies. Okay. So, as you could probably hear, that was not a terribly good experience for screen reader users. It was even kind of lucky that that particular data visualization or that website actually had some labels on the data so that you could hear votes, 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 how many votes. Often it's just image, 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 or something else. So how do we make an accessible HTML chart? So luckily in the last few years, one particular company has made it really, really easy. So the advice that I have is use the HiCharts JavaScript charting library and add a couple of accessibility modules that they include in there, and that's it. That's the end of my talk. But jokes aside, unless you have a really, really giant development team, you probably don't want to be writing your own data viz library unless you really need to, especially if you want to make it accessible. It is quite easy to kind of get it to the mouse hover point where you can have tooltips showing on mouse hover, but there is quite a bit more work to do after that. And HiCharts isn't the only library out there, but is one of the most fully featured and best developer experiences I've found. Other libraries that you may have heard of, such as AM Charts, couldn't quite work out as easily how to get the accessibility module going in that. So a few years ago, I built a dynamic chart when I worked for a logging company. So on the screen, I have a column chart there, and this chart is to show effective log retention, how effective log retention policies are on keeping kind of disk space to a maintainable level. It was a column chart that ended up being at least keyboard accessible. And this was kind of working with the knowledge I had at the time. I was still learning and still trying to understand what makes an accessible data visualization a dynamic one. And I had a really good crack at making it screen reader accessible, but it was probably a horrendous experience for them, similar to kind of the video that I just played. And unfortunately, it wasn't tested with real users, which is really, really important and absolutely must do. So on the screen, as I think most of you, or all of you cannot see because it's tiny font, is the accessibility tree of the chart that I just displayed. And I actually can't even read it. And what I'm trying to demonstrate in this screenshot is that I added ARIA labels to each of those bars, or each of those columns, and it was really repetitive. The first part of the label was the same for every single bar, and so for a screen reader user who's trying to cycle through all of the data in the chart, they will just hear the same first 5 words for the chart, and then only the numbers changed at the very end of the sentence. So past me was trying to be descriptive, but unfortunately it made it quite a bad experience. So that's one example of why it's so important to test with actual screen reader users. Apologies if the internet is going to load. So alternatively, so I did that in d3.js. I've completely forgotten how to use d3.js, and it keeps happening every time. d3.js is like a library that helps you build SVGs easier. So alternatively, a bunch of research user testing has gone into the high charts products, and the head of accessibility and another co-worker of his actually joined the DataViz accessibility group that we virtually met up with once a month, and they were so cool. So I'm a huge fan. And so they've done a bunch of work so that you don't have to. So if you're not already sold on using high charts, it's really customizable. They haven't paid me for this. It's just they've made it really, really easy and nice experience, and it's pretty accessible. Still do usability testing. You do still have to do some configuration, but you don't have to build it from scratch. All right, so let's make a graph. First I wanted to talk to you quickly just through graphs that are images, just to start off with, and then we'll move on into HTML charts. So on the screen I have an image of a line graph. There's 3 data series or 3 lines on it. You might be able to see that there's JAWS, NVDA, and VoiceOver, so we're talking about 3 different types of screen readers. And there's a y-axis and an x-axis, and you're probably already picking up that there are a few things missing from this chart if you are into data. There are a few steps to kind of begin with to make the chart accessible. So a little quick checklist of checks that we can do for a static image, which also kind of carry on to dynamic charts or HTML charts. So we've got to get these ones right first, and then we can make it interactive. I've kind of split it into three different categories. The first test is content. And I usually do this first because thinking about the content and how to make the content accessible, and Cole talks a lot about this in the storytelling with data book, you might end up changing the chart completely. And you don't want to kind of work on all the other accessibility parts of the chart and then end up changing the chart and then having to go through and work through all the rest of the visual and non-visual accessibility needs of the chart after that. So making sure that there's a title, a descriptive title even, and axes are labelled appropriately, and one thing is number formatting, making it a nice experience, putting commas, making sure units are correct, making the chart and reducing the cognitive load for anyone looking or inspecting the chart. The next test after that is visual testing, so the things that probably we're all kind of think of first when we think of accessibility of charts is contrast, making sure the contrast is okay, meets the kind of usual requirements, if you're familiar with WCAG or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but in summary it just has to kind of not be bright yellow or a really light pastel. Making sure that we're not relying solely on colour or giving the option to be able to, add patterns to the chart. That's that alternative pathways again. If someone can use colour, then that's fine, but making sure that we provide the other alternative. And a font is a big one too, making sure that the font is legible, not using like very fancy arty fonts, sans serif or the Arial or Helvetica or anything that doesn't have the little extra bits on parts of the font more accessible to folks who may have dyslexia. Finally, non-visual, making sure that chart has alternative text or an image description. You might be familiar with this in HTML as adding the alt tag on the image element. So, so one of the hardest bits is writing alt text for charts, but someone in the data viz community has written an incredibly awesome article on just giving a simple template to be able to just take this template, fill in what you need, and that's a really, really good description of an image of a chart. Usually folks are including images on charts to complement an article that might be to support some sort of factual point that they are making in that article, and the chart is not really something that people are actually using to kind of explore or get data from. So describing what the chart is, and something that is really, really important is making sure to have a link to the data source, that alternative pathways again, so a download to a CSV file or maybe a HTML table on another page, so that if a person is not able to pass the visual chart, they can go and inspect the data themselves, if they would like. So even if you have an interactive chart, if you're not quite sure how to make it accessible with all the keyboard and all the JavaScript and all the screen reader stuff, what you can do is kind of wrap the chart in an image role and give it alt text, and then make sure that you have that, absolutely make sure that you have that link to the data so that they can download it or inspect it in a table. So that's a great start if you're not quite sure how to make it accessible in terms of screen readers and things. All right, and my favorite reminder is if you are tweeting and you're not aware that you can add alternative texts to your DDD Perth tweets. I don't quite remember how to do it, but I think when you take a photo, there's a little Alt button somewhere on your phone, and you can click on that, and you can describe your image as well. So you may have seen that Twitter has also brought out the alt button feature so that you can inspect other people's alt text. So if you are new to writing alt text, it is actually not that easy. It takes a bit of practice. You can kind of cheat and look at what other people are describing the images as on Twitter without having to, switch on your screen reader and try to inspect the image that way. All right, back to data viz. So, how to make accessible HTML charts. So what if we can't make do with an image? So for example, most people here probably have a banking or other finance app. This is the example that we're going to go with. It's quite a simple one. Have you ever thought about what the HTML or JavaScript might be behind those charts? I don't know, CommBank, I actually haven't tested it, but I'm pretty sure CommBank's kind of income outcome, that's not the right words, incoming and outgoing expenses are quite accessible. Yeah. Yeah, have you ever thought about like what is the HTML that is behind those charts? But first, usually we have a table of data, whether or not it's in Excel or it's made possibly in a JSON payload that's coming back from some service. We usually have some data in some sort of kind of tabular format, which is handy. You should keep this around. And now is actually a good time to ask, with this table of data, do we really need a chart for this? Or can we just leave it as a table and like that's pretty good? These are not real numbers or anything. I just made them up. So if the answer is yes, then all you need to do is make sure that the HTML table is accessible. Voila, a accessible dynamic data visualization. So on the screen I have a table of data with two headers of incoming and outgoing, and 3 rows of the months of July, August, and September, and some dollar figures in there. And so let's have a look at how to code this accessibly. Oh, that is very small. So I'll try to talk through it as best that I can. Just some things to remember is, firstly, the quickest way is to head to the WAI W3C site and have a look at the tables tutorial. Has excellent, every type of table you could think of, like where you have like a header row and a header column, or you just have a header row, or you have some random headers here, there, and everywhere. But the one thing that I've noticed folks forget the most is making sure to add scope. To use TH when a cell is a header, and using scope equals col if the header is along the top and it's referring to the column, and referring to scope and adding scope equals row when a cell is a TH in the header of a row. So this is a table with a row header and a column header and column headers. A little bit of kind of extra niceties to make numbers easier to read. In this table, we've also added a class to make sure that we right-align the numbers, because it is been known and researched that it's easier to read numbers that are right-aligned and have commas and all that good UX stuff. All right, so on to a dynamic data visualization. So we decided, no, we don't want a table. We want to go a little bit fancier. So on the screen, I have an interactive chart. And you wouldn't know it, but it's not actually interactive yet. So what I've got is a link before the chart and a link after the chart. I think Julie is cringing because I forgot to put underlines in the CSS to show that they are links. Apologies. And I've got a big chart in the middle that is a column chart that is the chart representation of the data that we just had in the table on the previous slide. And so I will firstly start off with using keyboard to test. So hopefully I can... focus styles will come up. They will not. Maybe if I get out of full screen mode. Escape. All right. Oh, the focus styles are very faint. That is not great. I'm going to switch to Chrome. Apologies. We will need Safari later to test with a screen reader. And I will switch to Chrome. And we're back. And hopefully... There we go. Hopefully those that can see the screen can see the focus outline on the first link before the chart. And we are expecting to be able to tab into the chart and kind of interact with it. So if we hover over it with our mouse, we can see, oh, fantastic, there's some really cool kind of, it fades out the other data and fades in the data that you are looking at, or the columns that you're looking at, and there's little tiny tooltips that you probably can't read from back there, but they are tooltips that have all the information so that if you were someone who might use screen magnification, if you are zoomed right into that tooltip, you have all the information that you need, and you don't need to kind of scroll across to the axes to kind of guess what this, what the y-axis and the x-axis categories are. So everything you need is in that tooltip, which is great. And we can click on the legend to toggle on and off. That's a nice feature. Straight out of high charts, everything you ever wanted in data visualization. So let's try and see. So I can't use a mouse, let's say. Let's try and interact with that chart. Oh, it skipped to the link straight under the chart. There is no way that I can get to that chart. The focus outline is going up and down, up and down. So how do we fix that? So unfortunately, high charts does not, out of the box, give you the accessibility straight away. I really wish that it did. So we'll add it. I'm using a framework called Reveal.js for the slides. And so I can just add that module in the code that I've prepared earlier. So I will, you don't need to pay too much attention to this. I will just uncomment out some JavaScript modules to show how few steps it is. So I'm uncommenting out, I actually only need to uncomment out one line of JavaScript modules, but I've added the other two so that I can talk through them at the same time as well. All right. So I should probably save it. And I'm back into Safari. I want to go into Chrome. Am I in Chrome? Yes, I'll do a refresh. All right. You may or may not have noticed something change on the screen. If you didn't, there's a little menu on the top right-hand corner now. I'll talk about that later, but let's see if it's keyboard accessible. Oh my goodness, so we are in. So I've just tabbed from the link before the chart into the chart, and it's focused on the first column that is the incoming, the monthly income for July 2022. And if I press tab again, it focuses on the legend, which has incoming as a light blue kind of color and outgoing as a very dark grey color. And if I tab one more time, it focuses me to the menu hamburger icon on the top. And then one last time to the link after the chart. And so notice that, so I'm just pressing tab, and it doesn't actually take me through each individual data point, because if there were a lot of those, that would take a person a very long time to tab all the way through and get to kind of the rest of the article if they don't really care about the chart or the rest of the app. So what they have added in here, and this is all quite new and not really, as several libraries have kind of done different things. There's also another awesome accessible chart library from Visa called the Visa Chart Components Library, I think. And so they have different kind of keyboard behaviors, but I really, really like the high charts one. It's really simple, and so I've kind of used that one as a reference if I was to build my own again. And when I built that one way back when. So the way to get to different data series is using the arrow, data points is using the arrow key. So I've just hit right arrow, it's gone to the next column of the same data series, or incoming monthly income. I don't know what word I'm looking for. And then hitting right arrow again is focused on the third column. And so how do I get to the next data series, or the outgoings? I hit right arrow again just then, and it focused on the outgoing, and if I keep hitting the right arrow and the left arrow, I can go between all of those columns. But I can also switch between series by pressing up and down arrow. So that's a really, really nice kind of behavior that HighCharts has come up with, I'm sure talking with lots of folks in the accessibility and the disability community. All right. So same thing with the legend. I can change between each. So I've just tabbed to the legend using left and right arrow to kind of switch between toggling them on and off. And going to the button, I can press the space bar, or press enter. I can press the space bar and use the arrow keys to scroll through the menu. But drop down menu accessibility is a whole nother talk. But basically, you can press space or enter and escape to get out of the slides, not the menu. And there's a bunch of options that they added in here. In particular, being able to export the data in a format that you like. So they have CSV, they have Excel, they have view a data table, which will actually show a data table. I can't show it in the presentation because it conflicts too much with the CSS of the Reveal.js, but I do have a code pen if we get time at the end. But a lot of really awesome options. So really, really fully featured data visualization library. Okay, so the screen reader experience. let's have a look at that. Live screen reader demos are not my forte. Let's see how this goes. Oh, I got to swap to
VoiceOver on.
Safari.
Application. Safari. Safari. Inclusive storytelling with dynamic data. Window. Inclusive storytelling with dynamic data. Web content has keyboard focus.
Is that
You are
speed
currently on web
okay?
content.
Yep. All right. So if I press
Link.
tab,
Take link. The link before the chart.
link before
You are
the
currently
chart.
on a link. To click this link, press Control, Option, Space.
Okay, and then I'm going to press Control Option and use the arrow keys. And so this is a common misconception, is that there is such a thing called a virtual cursor for screen readers. If you are not so familiar with screen readers, so it doesn't actually send any focus or hover or anything to the chart itself. So you won't see the same focus styles happening when I navigate around using the screen reader. And that is the reason why it doesn't send any sort of actions to the chart. And it relies solely on having the correct ARIA roles or the semantic HTML in the back but you will see the square box, if you can see, the square box of where this virtual cursor is, so you can get a bit of an idea of what's going on. And you will notice that there is a lot more to this chart when we navigate it with a screen reader. Okay, so pressing right arrow.
Monthly income and expenses, Q1 2022 to 2024, image. Created with Highchats 1021. Link. The link up. Monthly income and expenses, Q1 2022 to 2024, image.
I haven't refreshed.
Reload page. Inclusive July
After adding the
2022,
modules.
1002.
Let's try that again. All right.
August 2022, 1009. Show incoming. Selected. Toggle button. List 2 items.
Oops.
You are currently on a toggle button. To link. The link before the chart.
Apologies, I'll just get back to the start. All right.
Monthly income and expenses, Q1 2022 to 2024. Highchats interactive chart region. You are
So
currently in a region.
It's now an interactive chart with a role of region.
Heading level 3. Monthly income and expenses.
It's got a heading level 3, so screen reader users often use headings as a shortcut to navigate to stuff on the page. So having a heading in there is nice.
Bar chart with 2 data series. You are currently on a text element. Heading level 3. Monthly income and expense. Bar chart with 2 data series.
So it says bar chart with 2 data series. So it's describing the anatomy of the charts, which I think is really cool and super helpful.
Viewers data table. Monthly income and expenses. Q1 2022 to 2024. Collapsed button. You are currently on a button.
And it's going through some of the options that might be preferable for a screen reader user.
The chart has one capital X axis displaying categories. You are currently on a text element. The chart has one Y axis displaying amount. Data ranges from 382 to 2310. You are currently on a text element.
I'm just going to move the transcript into this screen, so as it might be a bit tough to hear.
July 2022, 1,293 Australian dollars. August 2022, 1,928 Australian dollars. Incoming. September 2022, 1,200 image. You end of incoming. Bar series outgoing. Bar series 2 of 2 with 3 bars. July 2022, 382 Australian dollars. August 2022 to September 2022.
So notice that the focus styles on the charts, the data series don't change.
August 2022, 1,928 Australian dollars. Incoming. Image. September 2022. Image. You end of incoming. Outgoing. Bar series 2 of 2 with 3. July 2022. 382 Australian dollars. Outgoing. Image. August. End of outgoing. Chart credits. Highchats.com. Group. You are currently in a group.
Chart credits.
Highchats.com. Clickable. End of chart credits. Highchats.com. Group. End of interactive chart group. Created with Highchats 1021. Toggle series visibility. Monthly income and expenses. Q1 2022 to 2024. Region. You list 2 items. End of list. End of toggle series visibility. Monthly income and expenses. View chart menu. Monthly. End of interactive chart. End of monthly income and link. The link after the chart.
So that is all of the extra kind of screen reader only accessible content that is added to make sure that the experience is equivalent for those who may not be able to see the chart as to those who are able to see the chart. All right, so
F5 button. VoiceOver off.
going to turn that one off and go back to Chrome. Okay, so quickly to kind of wrap up, just speaking through kind of what's under the hood of what's made this accessible. And I do recommend to take the time to kind of look at what's going on. If you do try out Highcharts, inspect the DOM, turn on the accessibility tree. It's in your developer tools. You can Google how to turn on the accessibility tree in either Chrome or Firefox or whatever browser you use. If you understand the accessibility tree, super helpful. But in kind of the step-by-step, firstly, using JavaScript to add mouse and keyboard interactivity. It is something that you have to deliberately do extra. Not for high charts, it's what's being done in high charts. But if you were doing it yourself, and adding aria to the parts of the SVG to give it meaning. For example, and we might have missed that with the demo just now, high charts has actually marked up the columns as images and then added an aria label to those images as it kind of represents what it is. It is an image on a screen. And then adding that non-visual content to describe the chart for the screen reader user. And it's also great for SEO. And last but not least, back to the start of the talk when we were talking about just working on accessibility for an image of a chart, don't forget about the content and visual accessibility as well. So that applies for both interactive charts. Keyboard navigation is tabbing to the main bits. So don't make them tab through absolutely every data point. Arrow keys between the data points or space or enter for buttons. And for a screen reader, front load the info. Give screen reader users kind of as much info as possible that they can pick through. But also make sure you give them the choice to kind of skip all of that. So make sure you have your headings on or even a skip chart button is something that we've used before as well. And don't get too creative with aria. The first rule of aria is don't use aria. A few accessibility folks familiar with that. Please use the high charts or other frameworks that have tested with real folks as a reference. And if you do roll your own, and I've spelt roll wrong on the screen, please make sure you engage usability testing with screen reader users and other assistive technology users. All right, a note on colour. This is a big one, and I've left it to kind of a little tiny gap. Don't use colour alone to differentiate data or differentiate different data series. So there's lots of talks about using patterns. You can use different shape markers and different patterns and stuff like that. But High Charts has also done research on this, and they say to use monochrome palettes if possible. And so this helps everyone, not just kind of red, green, colourblind folks. And it's also got cool kind of side effects, like you can print tactile charts if you make sure that you use a monochrome palette. And also be careful with patterns, they can make it worse. So, I have noticed that myself. So don't just go, stick a pattern on it, done. Take a little bit of time to think about it. All right, and I have a whole bunch of resources on there. Chartability, I highly recommend. It is like a WCAG for charts or a checklist of tests that is really deep and really, really useful for charts and accessibility of data viz. But I will go back to the first slide with the link to the slides so that you can go and find those and click on them. Thank you so much. Oh, that link is dataviz-ddd-2022.netlify.app.
I just want to thank Larene for coming along and giving the talk today. I certainly have learned a lot of accessibility sins that I commit on a daily basis from that. But yes, please thank Larene for her talk today, and we'll be going to a changeover with the next talk soon.